And welcome back to Capitol Tonight. Governor Andrew Cuomo's proposal to downsize New York's prison system by reducing as many as 3,500 beds statewide upset the Senate Republicans, who say that these facilities provide crucial jobs in the upstate economy. Even the governor's offer of $100 million worth of economic development aid to communities that would lose prisons didn't really help soften this blow. But what's worse than losing a prison is having absolutely no say in which facilities might close, which is why the Republicans have been negotiating with the governor on this. The issue, of course, remains a sticking point in budget talks. And here to update us on this thorny issue is Senator Mike Nozzollio. He is the chair of the Senate Committee on Crime Victims, Crime, and Correction. Thank you very much for being here, Senator.
Good to be with you, Liz.
So the fact that you're talking at this point, does that mean that you've come to accept that there will, in fact, be prison closures?
The governor has been gracious in including in discussions the criteria that should be used for prison closures. This isn't going to be done by the simple commissioner deciding. It's going to be accomplished through a consensus-building process that I think is important, and particularly important to have certain criteria that the closing commission can look at. You don't build prisons to grow jobs. You build prisons to keep people safe, to house those who have committed, in many cases, violent crimes. And we are looking at ways that we can ensure that the prison system is right-sized, that we maintain safety within the prison system, and don't hurt the economies of communities that over time have grown to rely on prisons for their livelihood.
So when the governor said in his budget address, he got a big applause line, right? And it seems really like sort of an eon ago, but that it was inappropriate and no longer would the state use prisons as an economic development engine for upstate communities because it wasn't right from a standpoint of justice for people, particularly minorities who end up generally in prisons. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
We never believed, again, that prisons should be there for economic development purposes. They have an economic development effect, but the fact is that you build prisons to house those who have committed very violent crimes and should be kept off the streets. Prisons are to keep people safe. That's why we believe that those who walk the toughest law enforcement beat in America, the correction officers and other correctional personnel, need to be also safe within those prisons, and that we should have a system that is rational and that is protective. We have an overcrowding situation actually in the maximum security facilities in our state, that in Auburn and Attica and other places, the prisons were built for single inmates per cell. Those cells are double bunked. And that creates a very tense situation that is, in many cases, very dangerous. That we're trying to say, Governor, if we know that spending has to be reduced, that we have to cut all across the board, and as Senate Republicans, we support that. What we want to see, though, is a rational way to ensure that we'll still have the integrity and safety of the prison system and not hurt those communities that may be losing a facility.
Okay, so the Senate Majority Leader, Dean Skelos, seemed to suggest this morning that there was a list somewhere that the Republicans were going to be able to present to the governor and say, hi, here, we actually would prefer it if you did this in the budget with these facilities, because the worst case scenario is that you have no say and the commissioner makes a unilateral decision at the back end after the budget, which is what it looked like some kind of amorphous commission with no details about how it would act would do after the budget was already over. Now I'm being told this is actually a little bit maybe too detailed of what Dean said.
The confusion was that Senator Skelos and all of us are working very hard to establish criteria, the criteria for the commission to act, and that criteria is critical. For instance, we believe that we should look at the marketability of the property that a prison is situated on as a part of the criteria. If you can close those prisons, if you have to close prisons, and we're not happy about closing any, but if you have to close them, you should close them in areas that have high value real estate that can be used for other purposes, can be sold and actually money gained to the state. Senator Skelos was looking at criteria. We're negotiating the criteria now with the Assembly. And that's the list he was talking about was a list of criteria, not a list of facilities.
So it would seem, though, that when you talk about real estate, that the location argument really applies the most to a place like New York City, where, as it turns out, you and I were speaking earlier, there are more facilities than I had any idea of in the city. The Democrats, of course, control the governor's office, obviously, and the Assembly majority. Are they going to go along with the concept that you might close a facility in New York? And can you even? Are there empty beds there?
The governor's been clear that he believed if closures were to occur, and he wants closures to occur, that the closure should take place across the system, not located within any specific area and overload that area. To that, his credit, I support that. It shouldn't focus just on one area. But there are prisons, for instance, in New York City that Governor Pataki tried to close that are now today still open but with low occupancy rates and on property that is extremely highly valued, high value real estate overlooking Central Park, overlooking the Hudson River, properties that in effect could be sold and money gained for the state. We also probably the most expensive piece of property that the Corrections Department of the state of New York owns overlooks the Hudson River a little further north, but there's a maximum security facility there at Sing Sing,
right.
And that can't be closed. It should not be closed because we are in such dire straits with the overcrowding of our maximum security facilities. So we're trying to work with the governor, and he has been extremely helpful in trying to work that out in terms of criteria, and we're negotiating hard with the Assembly to make that criteria acceptable for everyone.
Okay. Will you hold up the budget in any way, shape, or form based on the question of prison closures?
We're very hopeful that this can be resolved prior to the conclusion of the budget and be part of the budget process.
But not again a list of what would close, but rather sort of a delineation of how this BRAC-type closing commission would work going forward.
And the BRAC, you mentioned BRAC, Liz, that's something that I had happen to me where a military installation in my senatorial district was closed by the BRAC Commission. It's a federal type closure process.
Sure.
That process has a lot of different criteria, and that's one of the things that we're trying to establish in this commission. It's the first of its kind. It's a new type of a process that Governor Cuomo initiated, and we want that process to be fair, as he does, and we're trying to work out that the nuances of those criteria.
You know, you've been quite actually outspoken about your disapproval of Gladys Carrion, who of course is not the head of the adult prison system, but for juveniles. I mean, is that in this mix at all, trying to get rid of her? You've called for her ouster because of some incidents, including what's been sort of shorthanded as a sex party that took place at a juvenile facility. There was inappropriate behavior there, obviously. Are you trying to negotiate that in the budget?
No, not her anything personal to that individual. The incidence of violence in the Office of Children, Family, Secure Detention Facilities has risen dramatically, even though the population has declined. That our employees are at severe risk. We just saw a video of a 64-year-old teacher, a female teacher, who was brutally beaten by gang members at a youth detention facility. That morale is at an all-time low. That we're seeing violence occur all across the state as a result of those juveniles who are. The commissioner, I think, wants all juveniles to be treated the same. Frankly, that just doesn't work when one or a number of them are extremely violent. We've seen a violent perpetrator almost kill a police officer in Rochester. There's story after story after story about lax policies that have led to very severe injury to staff and others. And what the commissioner seems to want to do is now put those violent youth into the neighborhoods, into not secured detention facilities, and that policy has us very concerned.
Okay, but again, not part of the budget negotiations at this point.
Not to her personally, although there are discussions about the closure of a number of facilities across the state.
Well, Senator Nozzollio, I want to thank you for your time. We are going to be revisiting this, I'm sure, as the budget ticks down to its deadline, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Liz.